love, after all, and she needed every ounce of daring she possessed to face this man and tell him exactly why she'd come. Distractedly, she coasted her fingertips over the cool, velvety petals. What an odd offering for guests. She could imagine cut flowers in vases. Decorative arrangements were typical in finer houses. But these... Picking up the bowl, she breathed in the sweet aroma of the petals and felt her lips curve in a smile. They were so soft, so fragrant, so extravagant that they seemed almost romantic. And after the way their first meeting had commenced, she would never have taken him for a romantic. Surely he wouldn't have these on hand for every guest, and certainly not for every unexpected guest, like her. Prue lifted her head at once. It suddenly occurred to her that these rose petals weren't here for random guests at all, but for one in particular, the very guest he was likely entertaining right this moment, until she had interrupted. A surge of dismay strangled her throat. She swallowed it down and began to pace, clutching the bowl to her chest. Why hadn't she thought of this before? Of course he was with another woman, and they were engaged in whatever activities one normally did in the evening hours, like reading a book, watching the flames in the hearth, resting after a long day and... Oh, who was she trying to fool? He was a scoundrel. He was doubtless upstairs right this instant, otherwise engaged in something that he couldn't tear himself away from, something that involved two people, heavy breathing, perspiring, grunting, lots of grunting. And now, with her interruption, he would have to put his clothes on and... The parlour door opened suddenly. Prue startled like a rabbit caught in the garden with half a cabbage in her grasp. The dish went flying, petals rained down everywhere, and gravity brought the spinning creamware down directly toward her head. She squeezed her eyes shut, preparing for it to hit, hard. And yet, it didn't. When she opened her eyes again, she saw the staid butler holding the bowl in his grasp. Apparently, he was much quicker than he looked. Then, as if this type of thing happened all the time, he merely set it down on the table and said, "Right this way, Miss Thorogood." "Actually, there's been a mistake." She shook her head and immediately crouched down to the rug, nervously scooping up as many petals as she could. The bowl may not have struck her on the noodle, but she had some sense knocked into her nonetheless. "I should never have come." "His lordship is waiting, ma'am. There's no need to fret over the petals." He gently but firmly took her elbow to assist her in standing. Awkwardly, she transferred her handful into his. "Right. Well, be that as it may, I really must go before I disturb his lordship from whatever it is that I'm... disturbing." The butler followed her hasty retreat into the foyer. "Would you care to leave a card or a message?" "I think not." Reaching the door, her nervous hand fumbled with the latch, and just before she could finally manage to open it, she heard a familiar drawl behind her. "Leaving so soon, Miss Thorogood? Is that any way to greet an old friend?" Chapter 1. A month earlier. If the carriage went any slower, they'd be travelling back in time. Leo Ramsgate, Marquis of Savage, muttered a curse beneath his breath and snapped his pocket watch closed before he tapped on the hood. "What appears to be the problem, Rogers?" "Shape, my lord." Ah, that explained it, he thought with a glance through the rain-dappled window toward the rolling hills of the verdant Wiltshire countryside. He wondered, and not for the first time, why he'd agreed to escort his former paramour to Bath. Typically, when an affair ended, it was over and done with for good. And yet here he was, waiting for sheep. As they came to a complete stop, a heavy sigh drifted across the carriage. "Will I be so easy to forget, Savage? No, don't answer that. You'll only say something detached and uncaring to make me feel guilty for my part in this premature separation of ours. Yet you never take any blame for pushing me into the arms of another man." Thus far on their journey, Lady Chastain had held fast to two topics of conversation, the weather and their misunderstanding, as she put it. If she wasn't scourging the rain for frizzling her auburn coiffure and the dreary grey atmosphere for doing nothing to complement her complexion, then she was relentlessly...